Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Janet Barlow and I'm the Executive Director of Hike Nova Scotia. And thanks for joining us for our Stronger Boards Good Board Practices webinar. So this is the second in our Stronger Board series and also the second in the larger trail sector capacity building webinar series. It is offered through the support of the Nova Scotia Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism and Heritage, and it is part of our Trail Builders Network offering. And the Trail Builders Network is our capacity building hub for trail groups, First Nations, and municipalities that build and maintain hiking trails. Hike NS represents the largest group of trail users on our trails, and we also represent trail building groups. Hike was approached by Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage to spearhead this project because they see, as we've seen as well, that many trail groups are struggling to keep their organizations afloat. Volunteers are hard to find, they're aging out, and for folks who just want to build and maintain trail, this board stuff can be a little bit challenging. So we hope this webinar series will help, and it's for all groups in the trail sector. I do want to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kmaq, which is the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And the Mi'kmaq were the first hikers, and there are trails in this province that have been hiked for thousands of years. A little bit of housekeeping before we go too far. So it'll be about an hour and a half in total. If you have questions, please put them in the chat, or you can put your hand up. You could also turn your video on. Grant will answer a few questions per slide, but otherwise he'll answer questions at the end. And again, if you're shy, you can use the chat, but feel free to put your hand up or turn your video on. So please stay muted throughout, just to cut down on background noises, unless you're about to ask a question. And also maybe keep your videos turned off during the actual presentation, just to avoid visual clutter and distraction. If you're having technical problems, see the troubleshooting link in your confirmation email and try the settings icon on your screen or try phoning in. Before we get started, I'll tell you a little bit about Hike Nova Scotia. We are a provincial nonprofit and we're just trying to grow a culture of hiking throughout the province. We strive to be the voice for those who hike, walk, and snowshoe, as well as those who build and maintain hiking trails. We're all about hiking promotion, education, and just encouraging people to get out on the trails. We do that in a number of ways. We offer a seasonal guided hike and walk series. We run the NS Walks weekly walking group program. We have the Hiking Summit annual conference coming up in Bridgewater, May 30th to June 1st. And there's going to be a really great session that is very relevant to trail builders. We offer a number of skill building in-person courses as well as webinars. We promote the International Appalachian Trail in the province. We have the Hiker Challenge where you can earn badges. There's the Young Hikers Club, and of course there's the Trail Builders Network. So we are member-based and paid members get lots of perks and discounts. We also have a website and social media that are great resources for hiking and trail information and events. And I'll mention this at this point, that we have this whole series of webinars. I think many of you have probably already signed up for all or most of them, but just in case, these are found on our website and you can register for them there. And also just a heads up about a project we'll be telling you more about later in April. We have our trail support coordinators. So we have funding for 2 coordinators to work with a number of groups on helping them with communications, helping them with promoting volunteerism, planning events, as well as providing assistance as they tackle some of the governance things we'll talk about today. So without further ado, I will come off of presentation mode so we can get to the good stuff, which is Grant McDonald is our presenter tonight. He is an adult educator and consultant living in Dartmouth. He has a long-standing and enthusiastic interest in nonprofit governance and leadership. Grant is a former Dalhousie professor in continuing education, and I actually took his Improving Nonprofit Governance Certificate program through Dal many years ago. He keeps the Governing Good website, which focuses on nonprofit leadership practice, providing insights for boards and senior executives. And so maybe we could do a quick introduction of folks. And let's see my screen. Okay, there we are. So maybe what we can do is I'll go through the list of folks on my screen here. And I see Charlene. Do you want to unmute and introduce yourself? Say who you are
Hi,
and what organization you're with.
hi, Charlene Porter from Guysborough County. I'm with the St. Mary's Trails Association.
Great, thanks. And Dale?
Hey, good evening. My name is Dale Wells. I'm with the Nova Scotia Off-Road Riders Association. I attended the last meeting and it was very, very helpful and looking forward to another great session.
Welcome back. And Jeremy?
Jeremy Cromwell. I'm the safety coordinator for the Snowmobilers Association of Nova Scotia.
Right, welcome. And Michelle?
Michelle Richards, Regional Physical Activity Consultant in Cape Breton, as well as a Hague, Nova Scotia board member.
Hello, hello. And Ron?
I'm president of the Yarmouth County Trail Development Association in Yarmouth.
Great. And is that Michelle as well with Yarmouth County Trails?
No, this is Danielle.
Danielle, sorry.
That's fine. That's good. And I'm the treasurer for the Yarmouth County Trails.
Right on. Great. Thanks for joining everyone and introducing yourselves. And I will hand it over to Grant.
Thank you, Janet. Nice that we're joined here tonight with 4 people, I think, who were at the last session, and at least two new people, Jeremy and Ron. I think are new to this particular discussion, so welcome both of you. Janet said we would just have a couple of questions on some of the slides, but I think we might open it up a little bit. It's not a large group, and I'm expecting there may be some questions as we go through it, as well as ones to save at the end. So let's get underway. Nice to be here with you tonight. So basically, it's going to be a fairly focused webinar. So I'm going to talk, and I hope you have questions about bylaws and how to maintain your group's legal status, maybe your relationship or what your interactions with the Registry of Joint Stocks. Then I'm hoping that maybe the bulk of our discussions will be look at policies and procedures, and I'll be interested. Janet sent out some questions before in preparation for this, and I would be interested to know what policies and procedures you might already have written in for your organization, what ones you might want to develop, and also what barriers there might be to putting things on paper in terms of how your group works. Anyway, we'll talk a bit about that and the advantages of having some things codified or written down. And then maybe sort of a wrap up of a number of things, quorums, meeting quorums, email guidelines, voting and other such matters. And I'm hoping you will add to that list of the kinds of procedures and things that maybe you struggle with some of the time. So anyway, that's outline. And we'll go to the first slide. I'm going to get into bylaws a little bit. So you probably already know this, but bylaws are your legal basis for your organization. Is what you submit to the Registry of Joint Stocks, and it covers things like your membership, members meetings, board meetings, officer roles. Often conflict of interest. There's often an article in bylaws that at least address general conflicts of interest and matters about quorum. So that's kind of the gist of it. Bylaws are pretty similar from one organization to the next, and lots of groups are aspire at least to review their bylaws every 2 or 3 years. I think that's good. And one of the things we can talk about is see what questions you have about your sorry, about your legal foundation. So let's just see if there are questions about bylaws. Any? I have, I'll mention this right now. So I have on my website a DIY guide to revising your bylaws. So it's kind of meant to help people look at their bylaws and make some adjustments to them without having to consult an expert. They're generally not that complicated, and maybe there's easier ways to approach revising them. Often seems to be a barrier. People find the language a little tough, and it is. But anyway, you can find it on my website. It's a 4-page document about how best to do it and what procedures you might have on your board to assigning the role of somebody looking at what needs to be changed. So I'll stop there. Are there any particular bylaw questions people would have? I welcome a couple. Okay. So if your board, somebody on your board hopefully knows about these matters. So every year you have to submit a report to the Registry of Joint Stocks, and usually sometimes it involves changes to the bylaws, but it almost always involves or frequently involves changes to your officers. So they have a form about officers, changes in your officers. They ask for a financial report. They have a form for that too. It's a little complicated, I find, but your treasurer or somebody on the board they need to have that a report of your revenues and expenditures and your balance sheet sent to them every year with your annual fee. We talk a bit about changes in bylaws, how you might best do that. You may know that there's a yearly fee. I thought to check this before, but I think the yearly fee may be around $30 just to renew your registration. If you skip a year or and you become you have to renew your whole organization, then the reinstatement amount is more. I think it's close to $60. So let me say here, when you have so often nonprofit boards, over a course of a year, people step down from the board and new people from the membership are added to the board. People resign, so often, I don't know, many groups that have a stable board from one year to the next. Sometimes there's a couple of changes. And one of the things to pay attention to is to resubmit your list of directors and officers when that happens. The registry here and elsewhere in Canada often requires 15 days notice to make changes to your additions and resignations. And it seems to be very, very tight to me, maybe not terribly reasonable, but I will say that accepting someone new to your board as a member as a new board member, or accepting somebody's resignation, and putting that in the minutes is not enough to take that person off the list of people who are responsible. So unless you inform the Registry of Joint Stocks, the persons that that resign, especially, will still be held accountable if anything goes wrong. So until it's formalized with the registry, they will remain a board member even if they have formally resigned and the board has minuted that. Questions?
Grant,
Yes.
so it has become a bit easier to do that annual filing now of officers and directors. It used to be that you'd need all these signatures, but now with the online filing, you don't need as many signatures for things. Like certain things you need to change, you do
Yeah.
need signatures, like for bylaws or change to your objects or whatever it might,
Yeah.
around the original memorandum of understanding or um, so so yeah, it is easier and it is faster now to do it
Yeah.
that way, which is good.
Yeah.
Thankfully they've done that now, and it's much more streamlined.
I think that's true, but I wonder if there may be lots of groups out there that haven't set up an online account to do that. So I would encourage that if you do that. The other thing I would add in terms of changing your bylaws is if you make a number of changes to your bylaws, it's not necessary to pass a resolution and send it to the registry that details all the changes you made. You just send a revised copy of your bylaws. So they don't need to know all the details. Some changes can be quite extensive, or at least extensive in terms of language. So that would be just a friendly hint. It's just it sends them in your approved membership resolution indicating the changes and attach your new bylaws. Are there some questions about bylaws, or is this straightforward for everybody? Oh, I was expecting more. All right. Couple of items that I am involved often in fielding questions from groups about bylaw matters. The one I get a lot is about quorums. So every set of bylaws states that there's a quorum for members meetings. So that's the annual general meeting and any special members meetings. And then bylaws specify a quorum for board members. So how many directors do you have to have present in order to carry on any business? So my suggestion to lots of groups is that for the members, so that's a larger group normally, of a quorum be of some quorums can be fairly small, but my suggestion, and I'm happy to see what you think, is to have a minimal number, a board member of minimal quorum that is larger than the board itself. So if the board, the bylaws say the board is 10 and you only have 8 people who are directors at the moment. 10 would be the number. I would suggest a quorum for members meetings to be maybe 15. For larger organizations, it might be 25, but some number that's larger than the board itself. So that the board itself isn't the whole membership. Bylaws and the quorum matters, both with members meetings and board meetings, often specify if any business can be conducted if there's no quorum. So the wording differs a little bit from one organization to the other. Most often it says that there can be no business conducted unless there's a quorum and at the start of the meeting. The reality is that lots of organizations start a meeting, go through some regular business without making any major decisions, and then somebody joins the meeting late, either in person or online, and you've got a quorum, and you can just continue with the work. But if you don't have quorum, and it doesn't look like you're going to get it, you really cannot conduct any business. So either you reschedule a meeting, or if there's enough people there to have some good discussions, you can minute those things, but you can't really make any decisions legally. And you might have to still conduct another meeting. We could talk, if you wanted, about voting matters when there's no quorum. And again, I have an article on my website about quorum. It makes some suggestions about whether you can, if you don't have quorum, or let's say you're 2 people short, whether some of the pitfalls of asking for people who weren't present vote on matters that the rest of the board who were present decided on. So again, it's very tricky territory, and I wouldn't recommend you do it without especially carefully minuting a departure from normal practice. Because you could get into trouble if you try to make decisions and then throw out some questions to board members who weren't present and asking for their vote. But it does happen a lot. I'll add here, just in terms of most bylaws, in terms of in-person or virtual or hybrid meetings, most bylaws I've seen don't have any mention about in-person or virtual meetings, but more and more groups want to add that as a article or sub-article to the bylaws that allows them meetings to take place either not just in person, but virtual meetings where some of the people are connected online and others are present in person. So, questions, please.
Can you elaborate on the number of board members versus the number required for quorum? So if I understood that correctly, the minimum number for quorum should be larger than the board itself. We struggle to get enough people to show up at the meetings, even as board members, quite frankly.
All right, so let me talk about, I didn't talk about the second point. So the first point was about members' meetings, quorum, being a slightly larger than the board itself. Directors, though, the quorum should be 50%. It doesn't do groups very well to put in a number for a quorum of board meetings. Usually ought to be 50%, 51%. So that means more than half of your board members are present. So that would be a better approach rather than specifying a number. And that should be, and I would add to that's the number of directors who are legitimately directors. So lots of groups have boards that say in their bylaws they shall be could be 12 or 15, but not all those positions are filled often. So 50% of the active board members is what would be a quorum for most nonprofits. Dale, is that answer your question? Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions related to bylaws and the registry of joint stocks and
Grant, Janet here. Just wondering about in the instance where you don't have quorum for a meeting and you hold the meeting anyway, but you don't vote on anything, but the discussion happens. Is it ever permissible to, after the meeting, do an online email vote on the motions that were talked about?
Well, I think it would be legally frowned upon, but I think lots of groups are faced with having to do that. And the concern would be, and legally the concern is, that people need to have some opportunity to deliberate on the matters before the board. So if you had to have an email vote after a board meeting where you couldn't make a decision, it would be important for those who weren't at the meeting to know what the various points of discussion were, at least a couple of them, so that they're not just simply making a vote, but they feel that they can weigh in or they know what else was said. So as long as there's a deliberative opportunity, then you're not going to be in any trouble. But I do think that this happens a lot, and I think it's important if you have to go to a vote after a meeting that didn't have quorum, that this should be minuted and such as a departure from normal practice, and that it should not be hidden that you conducted a email vote, but allowed in those cases those who weren't at the meeting or anyone else voting a chance to voice their views.
Right. So taking really good minutes in that case is really essential.
And I think it's okay. The minutes show that there was a departure from practice,
right?
Because it's what you need to do. But good minuting of that. So the minutes would include not only the discussion of what happens in person or those who are there, but also a note that because the decision could not be made, it was decided to hold an email vote This was done with giving everybody a chance to voice any concerns they might have about the vote they were making. So just doesn't need to be a long statement, but just acknowledgement of you're not following usual procedures and you've tried to accommodate the needs of the organization.
Right.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah.
Also, around virtual meetings, I mean, I thought that the Registry of Joint Stocks kind of, because of the pandemic, they kind of allowed, especially for EGMs and other meetings, they kind of put it out there that, you know, virtual meetings were okay. Is that kind of now like something that's kind of baked into the Registry of Joint Stocks now, or do we have to, should we put it in our bylaws?
Okay, well, I think it is probably baked into the registry's thing, but if your bylaws specify in person, then I think the article just saying that would have to be modified.
Right.
Otherwise, if it doesn't say whether, and many bylaws don't say the meetings, whether they're in person or not, then I don't think you have to do anything. But if it specifies in person, then I think you have to add. I think it would be, if you're revising your bylaws anyway, I think it makes sense to put a statement in there that either with respect to both members' meetings and board meetings, that the meetings can be held. So my statement would be something like meetings may be held in person, be held virtually, or involve a combination of the two. And that could apply both to members' meetings and board meetings.
Okay. Great.
So I wouldn't go out of my way unless unless your bylaws specify in person. I wouldn't go out of my way to make that change unless you're going to be making some other changes as well.
Right.
It is a frequent thing now that's being changed. But you're right about the registry's accepting of virtual meetings.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Other questions? Okay. So I want to spend a little bit of time on policies and procedures. And I'll be asking, this was a question that went out to you in advance of tonight, in terms of trying to get a sense, and I'll be asking you this, what policies you might already have in place. And I have a list of policies in my next slide. So policies, my way of thinking are as I've said here. So I think having things written down as principles in which you operate your nonprofit is really good. And I think people are confused, or people sometimes think that writing down a policy means it has to be really long. I don't think that's the case. But anyway, I think they're really important, and as another slide says, they're really important to ensure the continuity of your organization. New board members join and they won't know what other practices we have. And so rather than, well, in addition to explaining what the procedures are, having something written down really helps. So that from year to year, the organization sort of has a list of their main practices, and those policies, as you probably already know, don't need to be approved by the membership. They just need to be approved by the board itself and can be readily changed and improved upon. Indeed, I seldom or often say to nonprofits that just putting anything down on paper that's not perfect is way better than not putting anything down on paper. Maybe we'll just skip along. I think this is the right slide. So I was thinking about policy for trail groups, and this is the list I came up with, and I'm going to ask you which ones you don't have and whether there's any I've missed. But anyway, here's my list. You might have others that you don't have, or maybe you don't have some of these at all. So I'm asking, so let's just go around the room, so to speak, and see what, if this list makes sense to those present tonight. Dale, I'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, looking at that list, we've pretty much have that covered. We're right in the sitting here amongst a bunch of papers. We're in the process of amalgamating a whole bunch of policy manuals that we've had that date back to prior to 2010, and we're coming up with one document. We've got pretty much everything in there. The one thing that we don't have that's in there, which I caught, was an incident report. So we've got a version of it, but it's buried somewhere. So we'll make sure that gets added.
Okay.
Other than that, everything is there. We're about 80 pages, to be frank, on this thing. So I think we're probably a bit over the top when it comes to the level of detail. So we'll
80
probably
pages
pare it
full.
down.
Yeah. Now, Dale, you've got a staff. Are you a staff person?
I'm a volunteer, but we have two staff.
Okay.
One that's between the two of them, it would exceed one full-time position. So yeah, we've got members. This is a volunteer thing I'm doing. We try to keep our costs down by farming out as much out to volunteers as we can.
Sure. But if you have staff, your organization has staff, then I would strongly add to this list on the governance side a personnel or HR policy, even if you've only got one staff person. So
Yeah, we've got a DEI section.
yeah.
We don't have an HR policy per se. What would you suggest that include?
Well, I'll plug my website again here because I have a list of policies, draft or sample policies, including I think a one-pager on HR practices. So it covers hiring practices, following the rules set out by the Nova Scotia what's it called, the labor standards code. Labor standards code says lots of things. You don't need to repeat the things in the labor standards code, but a HR policy should mention that the labor standards code is the official legislation. So, and again, if you've got staff, that list of governance policies is going to get a little longer. You might have something on conflict, on managing conflict or conflict resolution, but this list is sort of more for those who don't have any staff.
Okay.
And on my website again, sorry to plug it, but I have a whole document which lists the possible policies you might want to think about having. So this is a simplified list, but I think it's adequate for most organizations.
And that's on the Governing Good website,
Governing
correct?
Good. So Governing Good, look under resources, and under resources, sample policy.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
And I think the guide to other policies might be sample policies and guides. So it might be the list of recommended policies might be in guides, but the actual sample policies are there in as PDFs and as Word documents that you can download and use.
Yeah, we definitely will take a look. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Other questions?
Dale, sorry, Grant, just to help out Dale, I put the link in the chat box for your
Thank you.
website.
All right.
Oh,
Thanks.
terrific. Thank you.
Yeah. So other questions? Charlene, Michelle, what about this list of policies?
That looks good for trail grips.
Sorry, what was that, Michelle?
Oh, it looks good for trail groups. I've sit on some other associations, and we have a harassment policy as well.
Yeah,
Come in handy.
absolutely. Good suggestion. Anything would your organization have most of these in place?
I'm not on a trail group specific. I'm with
Okay.
some other associations.
Yeah.
Hi, Grant, it's Charlene.
Hi, Charlene.
Yeah, we're a very small group. We have most of that in place. But we're certainly lacking in some areas that need some improvement.
Okay, are there particular ones you're more interested in than others?
I guess, like, I sit on two different boards, but I'm kind of representing St. Mary's Trail. I also sit on the board of the Association Nova Scotia Geocaching.
Yes.
Both very, very small groups.
Yeah.
And very lean policies, like, yeah, very basic.
But all of these things might be covered, at least in the Trails Group one?
Yes.
Okay. Well, here's another thought. If you're on two boards, there's no reason why you can't share some policies, because some of these things would be as appropriate to one group as another. One thing I would mention, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if many trail groups use this, but a statement of a part of a code of conduct or conflict of interest or private confidentiality policy that actually is signed by directors might be a good piece in terms of the governance policies. So a signed, I agree to follow these rules, have a new director sign it might be something that would be good. Signing is a powerful way of connecting people to their responsibilities. The other thing I would add here is not here, and I've is a financial management policy. So a page that outlines the group's banking practices, whether they're dividing things into accounts, whether they require two signatures, how they might handle this day e-transfers. So a list of good practices around financial management. Again, this is something that you could create, and then it carried on from one set of board member to another, or from one treasurer to another. So financial management I didn't add here, but I've been thinking about it a lot. Like reimbursement of expenses, if in the case of people traveling or something, or someone who has, I'm dealing with this with a group I'm on already. Somebody's gone and made some purchases that the group agreed to, and they have to be reimbursed. So how do you manage that? So what issues of authorization? So you might add that to my list, to this list of governance policies. Basic financial management. Again, the value here is that this provides some continuity from as boards change, they've got their practices at least outlined. And despite I think it was Dale's comment of 80 pages, I think it could be done in far fewer. Are there any operational policies? So this lists operational policies. Are there other ones? And my expectation is that some of this might be common from one trail group to the next, but any thoughts of other things you might add on the operational side?
Grant, I just want to say too that there is the Trails Manual, and in the interest of keeping things simple, folks could develop some sort of policy that refers to trail maintenance, and then it just says as defined in the Trails Manual, because that's sort of like the go-to. And then yeah, and then you don't have to sort of be updating meticulous changes as better recommendations come along for different kinds of trail maintenance as time goes on. Yeah, and that's a point too that I'd heard before, that around policy, to keep it simple, and you need enough detail that people have clarification, but then going into too much detail, almost it kind of obligates you to sort of do things exactly as the policy states. So can you maybe speak a little bit about that balance of too much versus not enough?
Well, my rule of thumb, thanks, Janet. My rule of thumb is that a policy for small groups could probably be captured in a page. So and so the idea is there should be some room in the for interpretation. If there are other documents that are more detailed, then referrals of those rather than trying to incorporate those into your own policies makes a huge amount of sense. I think once you begin to have more than a page or a page and a quarter, I think that's a good benchmark in terms of length, and without too much detail. I mean, they're more about the governance ones are more about their sort of principles and practices that you want to instill, and and they ought to leave, again, more room for interpretation. And often groups create a policy when something has happened, and they realize they needed to have something written down. It's better to have something in advance of that. And again, I think the ones on the governance list here are probably, except for the committee terms of reference, are probably ones that are common from one group to the next. And all of those are, again, resources that I make available. And many of my draft policies, although they seldom go over a page and a half, could easily be simplified. So,
And doesn't that apply to the bylaws too? I've heard it said that try to keep your bylaws as short and as simple as possible, and then in your bylaws you can refer to the policies that you have, right?
well,
Because it's a big rigmarole to change bylaws. Like you have to
it is.
give
So, yes,
notice. But it's
Keep-
easy to change policies. You can change a policy in one board meeting.
that's right. That's right. So, yes, so bylaws that are, I think the standard format, I guess it depends on the font size, but I think they're usually 5 or 6 pages is all you need. And things like the role of the chair and the role of the treasurer and secretary can be very, very, very brief in the bylaws. But if you want more details, they would be best in a policy. Yeah, so keeping the bylaws especially need to be sparse. And again, registry, joint stocks, and they look at them, they're pretty much the same from one organization to the next. And that's the way they ought to be.
Grant,
Yes.
this is Danielle from the Yarmouth County Trails. I guess from our perspective, we are a small little group, and we have a lot of the operational things in terms of but we've termed it as a work plan. So we have goals and we have actions associated with those, and that's how we formulated it.
Yeah.
And it goes from quality management to risk management to construction report, financial, and communication. Those are the big headings.
Okay.
3 pages, which is kind of neat. And we evaluate that once a year because that's the work plan that we submit to our, so it's a living document, I would think, more so than a stand fast policy. But what we lack on, I think, from our perspective, is job descriptions. And actually defining our roles on the group specifically, so that somebody else who wants to come into our shoes, we can then share with them our knowledge, and it's written just in case things we leave all of a sudden kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, that's something where lots of groups are lacking in terms of descriptions of their various roles. And so I think that I would strongly advise you try to do a little work on those. They make for a very good discussion too. If somebody brings any member of the board, drafts something, takes a look at some examples from other groups or from some of my own examples I make available, and then pares it down and brings it back to the board as a document, rather than starting from a blank piece of paper. It's so much easier to have something to react to and change and massage, rather than starting discussion from scratch. So anyway, yeah, I think most groups could benefit from some basic governance policies. Again, it has been said, they don't need to be long. Thanks. And the operational side, I think is probably easier for lots of groups because they and often it's the governance piece that gets shifted. So I've been asking these questions. So many of you have some of these in place. Maybe you don't have in Yarmouth some of the governance ones, the job description for the chair and the members, etc. Be good if you could leave this webinar tonight with at least one that you're interested in developing. And I guess my question is what stands in the way of you creating written policy? Any thoughts about what that might be?
Time.
What?
Time.
Time.
Time?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
Well, one of my remedies for time is that you don't ask the whole board to do it. You get one person on your board to draft something and bring it back to the board.
Mm.
And often it can work well when that person being asked to do it is not the chair, because they often have all the duties. And having board members who have an opportunity to, go online and find some examples and bring it back. It's a very easy task for a board member to do between one meeting and the next. And so I would encourage that way the whole board feels some ownership of them. So rather than having it given to one to the chair to do this. So I don't think it takes a lot of time, but it does take initiative of the organization to say, look around the room and assign 3 different policies, or even just one. The one board member, Joan, could you research this, see what other groups are having, and come back in a meeting, 2 meetings from now, and bring us a draft. And then you discuss the draft and stand for the approval.
Yep.
Anything else that stands in the way of creating policy? I said in the last session that when about committees, I said, don't always assign something to a committee. And I'll reiterate that here, that creating policies and procedures more easily done by giving the task to one person, especially maybe a person that doesn't have already a lot of board work on the plate. Anything else that stands in the way? Or particular ones you would leave tonight and say, we're going to do some work on this policy or that? Like one of these? Any volunteer commitments? Janet and I were talking earlier before we opened the room here about following up on the work of these various capacity building seminars or webinars to see what actual actions has resulted. And I'm a believer that one small action is often a way to move ahead with things rather than looking at this list and say, oh my God, we need 5 different policies. Pick one, but I would recommend trying to pick one. Anyone willing to raise your hand and say, we're going to work on that policy or this policy?
Well, I'm certainly going to try to pare ours down and try to simplify. I think I like the concept of taking simplifying the bylaw with a reference to policies, which are pares things down a bit, and also obviously makes it easier to modify things going forward. So that'll be my priority.
Okay, thanks, Dale.
I concur with that too.
Yeah. Other thing is that that if you have a lot of policies and they're all still valid, it's just to create a single overarching policy for each category, so that maybe it's a half page. So, and have the board deal with that, so the board is not into the weeds of all the details. So my HR policy on my website is meant to be like the first page of a set of HR policies. That's all it's meant to be, and it just says basically all the other details of regarding harassment, other things, or wages, or job descriptions for staff will be looked after in that section, not in the section that the board has to deal with. So the board is never faced with reviewing an 80-page document. Anyway. Okay, I'm gonna move on. As I've already said with this one. Unlike bylaws, policies don't need to be far less perfect. Because as Janet said, they can be changed, readily changed from one meeting to the next if they need to be. So they don't need a lot of wordsmithing time, just what are the basic principles? All right. Again, this is a repeat of I've already said, I think. I guess I would underscore here that the value in having policies in terms of recruiting board members and volunteers for that matter. Again, you don't want to give a volunteer an 80-page document, but I think if I was volunteering for a board, being on a board, I would want to know. I would appreciate being given a job description for my role as a director. And I might want to know what the financial management practices are, or a copy of the budget. All right. So that's it. I was if we had, maybe if we had a larger group, there'd be a lot more questions, but the ones that you all asked were good ones. And I get a sense that in many cases you're in pretty good shape on your bylaws and your policies. I mentioned before, I'll mention again, that having a signed agreement, written signed agreement with board members might be something you might want to adopt as a practice. If you don't already do that. I've got a code of conduct on my website as one of the policies that you can download and adapt to your own needs. It's a little different than a conflict of interest one. So the next webinar in this series will deal with much more strategic issues and having a few hints of some other tools that you might want to use, but sticking with the topic tonight of bylaws and policies and creating policies and meetings and quorums. Are there other things that have worked for you? Or do you have questions?
Well, I have an ask.
Please.
Because we're the job position descriptions, is one of our things. I'm just wondering, does anybody have position descriptions to share with the group here that you've referred to, or that you use in your other organizations that you might want to share with Yarmouth County Trails?
I'd be happy to share. We have a job description for treasurer, bookkeeper, general manager, and so forth. Be happy to share them.
Oh, that would be great, Dale.
Can you fire me your email address?
I certainly can. I'll put it in the chat.
Sure.
No, a recent one.
Jeremy or Ron, do you have any questions or suggestions of things that are working for your groups?
Yeah, well, that's the first I'd heard of that. And we were told to deal directly.
So I'm breaking up. What are you saying?
They would send stuff directly to Dave Grant. And so I didn't know. So
I think he's on the phone.
Oh,
No.
Ron? Maybe we'll get Ron back in here in a minute, but
Oh, I'm on now.
oh, good. I hear you.
Sorry, I got I've been sidetracked.
So what have you heard that's interesting to you, and do you have any successes in your own group that you want to share?
No, I'm sorry, I'm just sort of flustered right now.
Right. Was there anything that was presented that's
Oh,
new to
and
you?
there's lots there to dig into, and I'm just trying to straighten that out in my mind.
Can anyone be of any help afterwards?
Hmm. No, I think Danielle and I will discuss it and
Okay.
start from there.
All right. Thank you. Other suggestions about things that are working well for you, or things you're still curious about when it comes to bylaws, policies, quorums?
I think it was a help just to talk about everything and just go down through it like you did. Um, I was a club president before I became an employee of Sands, and right now we have a group of people going through our policies and bylaws right now. That'll be talked at the next meeting. The Sands policy manual is about 60 pages long. Our bylaw document's about 12 pages long. There's definitely room probably for some more policies to be added, but just an ongoing project, and just good to hear this stuff.
Okay. Thanks, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
Any final words of wisdoms or requests or favors from each other?
I'm wondering, Dale, could I get a copy of what you're sending to Yarmouth? I'll put my email in there.
Sure, be happy to. And
Thank
by the way, this is running a little bit under schedule, but do appreciate your time management skills, and this was very useful. So please don't feel that that there was anything lacking in it. I really got a
Okay.
lot from this, and it gives me a lot of direction. We're coming from years of various people manning the helm and not necessarily having a great skill set from the beginning. So we're kind of just carrying on when clearly we could be paring things down and making it a lot more effective.
Okay. Thank you, Dale, both for all that comment.
I just put the link to our Sands website in the chat. That goes to our policies and bylaws. Um, there's an index at the top of it, but if anyone's ever interested to see some of them different bylaws or policies, you feel free to go through. And if you need to use something for your own group, then copy and paste, but approved by the board first with a quorum.
Okay.
I'm not seeing an email address pop in the chat yet. Oh, there it goes. Perfect.
Well, it's nice to see the cooperation and sharing of resources. You always stand more of that. Again, groups don't have to start from scratch. A lot of the work that you might want done in terms of improving your governance has been done by other groups, and so reaching out and sending and helping one another is music to my ears. Well, if there's no other questions, I'm happy to sign off. Our third session is on April 23rd. I'll have some new tips for you. I'll look from you some tips that are working for you and see if there are any burning questions. So, Janet, in terms of putting out some reminders about that, hoping that people will come with some burning questions, even difficult ones, about, things that have gotten your board in a tizzy.
Which never happens, right?
That never happened. That's right.
Well, thank you, Grant, so much for all of the great advice and also the resource. So I will follow up on email and I'll send out these links, including the ones that that are in the chat. And yeah, governing good is a great go-to. And like you're all doing, I myself have begged, borrowed, and stolen from many organizations to get, you know, policies or different documents. Like, why start from scratch, right? When you can find a similar organization and it's a good starting point. It may not be exactly what you need, but that's what cut and paste and delete is for. And it saves time. That's for sure. So great. Thanks for everyone for sharing. Yeah, so I will follow up in the next day or two with an email with those links. There will be a link to this recording. The recording is also on our website. So if you want to go back and view it again, or if you want to share it with someone else, they are the recordings are free and ready for folks to view at any point. And
Can I make a request?
sorry?
Can I make a request? Could you include, I just don't recall if it's there or not. So there, I wrote down and recorded the dates of the Stronger Board sessions, but I'm actually interested in some of the other ones, the trail building associated ones. Could you add that to the emails?
Yes, definitely. Yep. Yeah, I'll put a link to
Thank
all
you.
the webinars for sure. Yeah. Yeah, we've got some great ones coming up on accessibility, volunteer recruitment, all kinds.
Yeah,
Great.
that's great.
So yeah, so we'll there will also be a feedback survey, so you can just comment on the webinar as well. Yeah, good luck everyone as you dive into policies. I'm actually a policy geek, so I kind of enjoy this stuff, but it's not for everyone. But maybe you can find maybe there's someone on your board who's a policy geek too, and you can assign them to to
You make them into a policy geek.
or you make them into a policy geek. Policy is so cool. If only. So thanks again, everyone, and thanks again, Grant. Wonderful, wonderful knowledge that you're passing on to folks. And I hope you all have a lovely night and happy trails.
Okay.
Thanks
Thank
again,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.